Hello and welcome to Vital Readings. I'm your host. I'm called Vitali Muvunya and I'm with the co-host, Mr. Let him introduce himself.
My name is Bruno Iradukunda and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we are very, very much excited to host you once again on our book reviews. Today we are doing a very special book. It's a book that is called Understanding Sonship by Hubert SUGIRA. You might have already heard of Hubert SUGIRA HATEGEKIMANA. He's been holding Kigali Family Nights, and he's been outspoken on family matters. This was his first book, and when it was published for the first time, it became the number one Amazon bestsellers in 3 countries. It was the bestseller in the US, in the UK, and the Canada. And it's a very, very interesting book. I tried to check if there were other books that write about this topic of sonship or mentorship. Yeah, there are very many books that talk about mentorship, but there are very few books about sonship. So it's a very interesting book. You can still find it on Amazon and some of the bookstores. I don't know which bookstore right now that has the copies, but you can definitely find it on Amazon. So let's dive into it. Mr. Bruno, what do you know about this book?
It's one of the books that I read in a few days because of the excitement. Remember, once I found out about the book, I was very excited to read about it, and I found out some new concept that I really enjoyed. So it's a nice book, and I encourage our viewers and our listeners to read it. It's a very exciting book.
Actually, I remember when you read the book and you talked about some of the contents in a camp. We're in a camp somewhere around Kagugu, and I remember you telling him about what you had already read in the book. It was about, I think, the fatherless generation or something like that, and he immediately invited you to become his mentee.
It was an exciting moment. It was my first time to hear about this concept, and with our history of Rwanda, hearing about sonship and you being able to tap into your destiny because of a father, it was something exciting for me to hear, and I was a bit challenged and scared that we may have missed out, especially with our history. When you read, if you can dive into the book, when you read the foreword, and one of his father, one of his mentor, what he writes about the book, that when people come to see him and he asks them, do you have someone you obey? Do you have someone you
trust to obey?
You trust. Yeah, and that was a challenge to me when I was reading this book, because at that time I checked my life and I was like, okay, apart from my mom, who else do I have that I can say that this person is I can obey him and I can, submit under their leadership. And if you read the story in here, how this Dr. Williams became his father, it was after the tragedy death of the Dr. Miles Monroe. And he gave him a proverb, an African proverb saying, when a father dies, then the big brother takes over. And to me, that was something that was missing in my own life. So it was a book that was very challenging in my life, because I wasn't relating at the beginning. So I'm excited that we can do a book review about this book today.
Yeah, it will be a little bit challenging because we all love this book and read it several times, and you have more than I interacted with the contents and the things in here much more. It will be a little bit challenging knowing what to say and what to leave out, and what to leave to the readers so that they may read them for themselves. So let's start with the title. The title is Understanding Sonship, and what first comes to your head with sonship, you think it's S-U-N, son of the light. But it's actually not sonship. And the way he defines sonship, he says on introduction, that's page 23, he says sonship is a relationship between a son and a father. But also, as you keep on reading through, you realize that it's not just about a father-son relationship. It's not about biological father and a biological son. It's more of a son figure and a father figure. And as you were saying, I think it's a very big challenge, especially in our communities in Africa, but particularly in Rwanda, because of the 1994 genocide against Tutsi, and the war that was there before that, and the persecution that was going on, and the killings that had happened earlier. There are a lot of people that did not have their fathers, did not have fathers, their biological fathers, and I guess it's imperative to focus on this relationship and to look at why is it that someone loses if they don't have a father figure. You were saying that you yourself realized that you didn't have anyone else except your mom that you could trust enough to obey, and you say that was challenging to you personally. What are some of the things that someone who does not have a father figure, who does not have this relationship of sonship, what do they miss out in their lives?
I would say, first of all, it's their relationship with the Creator, because when we talk about God, we talk about Him as a Father, and I believe, me personally, I believe God created families to demonstrate or to show us or to point to us to God. So if you have missed your earthly father or a father figure in your life, sometimes you tend to compare God with the experience of a father you had. So if you never had a father, sometimes it's hard for you to relate with God as an authority, but also as a father. So I believe that's one of the biggest and the most challenging thing for someone who has missed out this relationship.
Yeah, one of the things that he mentions in this book, that you miss out if you do not have a father figure, is that you do not have success. You do not succeed in life. By the way, he defined success was interesting to me. It was very interesting to me, because the way he defined success would actually force you to find a father figure whether you want it or not. So let's look at the definition that he gives success on page 27, and I quote: "Success in this life is not measured by how many great things that you are doing or the magnitude in which you are doing them. Every product is only successful when it has accomplished the purpose for which it was made in the first place. You are only successful when you fulfill God's purpose for your life, or when you have done the work your Creator created you to do." End of quote. So, for him, whether you do big things, great things, and in great magnitude, and a lot of things, I mean, the number of the things that you achieve on this earth, and the quantities in which, I mean, the magnitude, the quality, whatever other measurement you would want to use, if it's contrary to what God created you for, then to him it's not success. What do you think about that? I mean, well, one would ask, let's say a lot of our heroes that were not necessarily Christians. Nelson Mandela was not a Christian. Therefore, he may not necessarily know what God had created him for. And we often use his example as one of the great people that have achieved great things. So I was wondering, according to his definition, do you think someone could have achieved a lot of things on earth and has been celebrated a lot, but still they missed out, they were not successful?
I believe each and every one of us has that piece of God in him. And even the book, he says it, where he defines to glorify and glory, the word glory, which means, if I can find it, but I think he says it's the fullness of nature. Of course, if we look at the trees around us, it will be very hard for these trees to be at their fullness if they are not connected to the source, if they are not connected to the ground. And human beings also, it's very hard. I wouldn't say impossible, depending on what you call success, but I would say it's very hard for a man to fulfill what God created you to be if you're not in relationship with him. I'm avoiding to be very religious and radical, but I would say it's impossible to be successful without your connection to the source, which is God. Yeah.
That sounds interesting. So when you go to chapter 1, where he talks about relationships, there's some things that he says here that I would like to get back to, and then we continue with what's inside. So he says on page 41, and I quote, "On the journey to your destiny, there are 3 types of people with whom you will interact. Each person you encounter in this life will to some extent fall into one of these 3 categories or positions: fathers, peers, and sons." So obviously he goes on to explain how these 3 categories will enrich your life. What fathers do, what mentees or those who are juniors to you do, and what your peers do. Since we will do a lot about, since the book is about mainly the juniors and the seniors, or the sons and fathers, I wanted us to talk a little bit about your friends. What do friends do to you? Because we definitely will find out what the sons and fathers do to you, but the peers, what's the position, what is the role of peers in your life?
So peers are people that you relate, I would say, on the same level, where you have most of them you have same interest, or you're on the same journey. So you operate on the same level. I would say that it's more of encouragement to me. People, let's take an example. If you go to the gym and you all carry the same weight, that kind of person is your peer. So what the peers do is to encourage you. Let's do 10 reps today. Let's do 11 reps today. So when your peers, you have the same vision or focus. It's more of an encouragement to me. Yeah.
So this is more of what the Bible says, that birds of the, no, that's not the Bible, but it's a proverb that a lot of people say, that birds of the same feathers flock together. But also the Bible says, "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked." That bad company will corrupt character. So I guess peers also have a lot to do with shaping our character, being there for us. Sometimes your father will not be there for you in some sort of situations, and your sons or your juniors or your mentees cannot be there for you in those kind of situations. Yet your peers are the only ones who are going to fit there in that particular way than the rest of the groups.
There's something the author mentions, that these are relationships that will help you in the future, and I agree. I've seen it in my life. In my young age, the teachers used to say, "You guys will be the next ministers. You'll be the next doctors," but it's always amazing when you go to a certain company and you find someone who used to be your peer or your friend or your classmate is the leader or is the boss, is there. So if you have kept a good relationship at that level of peers, then it's easy to relate with that person, even though they are now ahead of you, or if there are people who are coming to you as those who need service from you. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. So, anyways, he talks about the different levels that the person has to go through to become a son. He talks about the four stages. Of course, people who will be reading the book will find much more about that, but I wanted us to just go through a little bit through them and give people a kind of taste to what those levels are. Yeah.
So he talks about 4 stages. One of them is what he called the public, or where people interact with the fathers on a public,
In a crowd.
in a crowd way, if I may call it. So So these are relationships that you have in your life that don't cost you anything, or you relate on a camera, or so
they just consume your products, but
yeah,
you're not really you do not have a personal sort of connection. Yeah.
And he goes on to say then the next stage, these are people who just don't want to consume, but they want to be partners. And then so they want to help you to produce more of what you are producing out there. So and I think this is one of the hardest to come from that. Anyway, talking out of my own experience, to come out of the crowd to
become a partner.
To become a partner, even in the business world, to come in someone's business and say, I want to help, I want to invest my time, I want to invest my money in your business. It requires trust. So I think on this father-son relationship, if you manage to get on that level, I think it's a big milestone that you have gone through. So from there you go to what we call mentees,
which is a level that a lot of people will get to and stop from there.
Yeah, I know most of the time you ask the questions, but I'll ask you, why do you think that's the level that? Do you think the mentees get satisfied with what they are getting?
I'll tell you, I actually think that it's because a lot of people are not familiar with this concept of sonship. Look at how many times you had heard of mentors and mentees and mentorship before you got this book and understood another level of mentorship that is called sonship. So I think because of the expectations that are set at this level of mentorship, a lot of people get to it and they think that they have already got there. So they don't know that there is an extra step that they could take to get something else.
Yeah, but of course the fathers who are watching this video will tell us, but I think also the fathers sometimes, because if you take on someone as a son, which is the fourth stage, that means there are some responsibilities that you have to acknowledge. If you go in the African content or in the normal world content, if someone is your son, then that means you have to leave them with a legacy, with an inheritance. And so taking on you can't take everyone in the crowd or on the partner level and choose to make them your sons. That means you be a wealthy man, not with financial wealth, but also with mental wealth, to be able to live with each and every son something that they can survive on.
Yeah. For the rest of the book, because we're not going to give everything out, people have to go and buy this book and find and read more of this that we're talking about. So on the next, for the rest of the book, the writer starts now talk about, because after explaining the 4 stages of sonship, where the way a person graduates from one level to another level to another level, for the rest of the book he talks about the process of sonship, the steps that what a person has to take to become a son. And as we were talking about the levels of relationships that you have with your father figures, I think people should be able to evaluate their mentorship relationship and tell where they actually stand. So do you think you are a son yet? Do you think you are a mentee? Do you think you're a partner, or you're still in the crowd? Behind the camera, when got here, I was asking Bruno where he thinks he is. And I think he just chose not to give me an answer. But it's interesting to ask yourself, where do you fall under the 4 categories? Anyways, so he goes on to explain the way everybody meets their future fathers, or their future mentors, or their future whatever you call it. And he says that the first thing is recognition, recognizing who you are. And part of what he talks about that I chose, because this is a very big chapter, and maybe if we were to give an answer, it's that when you meet your potential father figure, you have to recognize that they have something that you would want that you don't have yet, and then go start serving them. And then they will also get to a time that they recognize. I don't know if it is recognition or if we call it another name, because he calls it another name in the book. But what I wanted us to talk about as we go through this chapter is something he introduces. Of course, I've heard him talk about it in other videos, and it's called naming. But I'm sure that not a lot of people are familiar with this concept of naming. What would you like to tell some people that about this thing of naming, this concept of naming relationships?
Allow me to say it from a son perspective, and relate it with this recognition chapter that we are talking about. So you see someone, you recognize them, you love what they're offering. It may be in a different domain, it may be a pastor, it may be a political leader, someone that you aspire into. And with our generation, most of the people, most of the father figures, or people who have achieved something in their lives, they have things on the market, or they have things out there. And when you recognize them, then you have to consume whatever they have on the market. You need to consume whatever that they are producing. One thing I've seen that as a challenge in the recognition and naming that I want to be a mentee of this person is because you want to jump the levels. So you want to name someone a father figure, and yet you haven't consumed anything of theirs. You haven't consumed from the crowd level, you haven't consumed everything that they are offering. So it will be hard for a father to name or to recognize you. Yet, and I think it's more, I was about to say it's more spiritual, but I would think it's hard for a father to name you or recognize you, yet you haven't consumed what they have offered.
Yeah, in one of the interviews we have had with some of the prominent speakers, there's one of the interviews that we had the other day on another book by another author from here, and the person we were interviewing was a mentee, and he explained how actually for him it was the father figure that actually approached him, and from there they started working together. And so I still wonder if this thing of recognition is not actually, of course, talking about it from the perspective of the book, it looks like it's always, not always, but most of the times it's the son that takes the first steps. But I wonder what circumstances would be there for a father to actually recognize a son without the son making efforts, like in that relationship that I was talking about of the person we interviewed recently.
I think that was even Jesus' example. It's not, when you read the Gospels, Jesus chose the disciples before they even recognized who he was. So I think the fathers have their levels. It's part of their responsibility to recognize the sons. I think it's much easier because there's that level of respect that comes with it, and there's that level of belonging, especially on the son level. When a father chooses to recognize you, there's a way you feel accepted, and valued.
One of the things I love about this book is that the author keeps on bringing his personal stories. The author of this book is actually one of the sons, not biological sons, but sons of the late Dr. Miles Monroe. So part of what I love about this book is that he keeps on going to the stories of how he met Dr. Miles Monroe and how he moved through these stages that he's explaining in the book. He has actually lived every one of them. And in the next chapter, it talks about following. But I would like to read you a story of how he recognized and followed his potential father, because at the time he wasn't his father yet. And I will quote: "When I met Dr. Monroe, I knew he was going to play a role in my future. But what I did not know at the time was that you do not just decide to submit to someone else without being sent by the one who is covering you at the moment. Then when I realized that I needed to do things correctly, I went to my pastor and told him that I would not be going to the Bahamas for the Global Leadership Summit organized by ITWLA as I used to, unless he sent me there, and thought that it would be beneficial to his ministry for the future. In the previous years, I simply told him that I would go. In the previous years, I simply told him that I would be going to the Bahamas. But this time, it is not just to inform him with information, but the final decision was in his hands. He realized the importance of the decision he was about to make and asked me for a time frame to think about it before getting back to me. He's a very wise man. The next morning, he came back and told me to go. Even if he was not fully aware of what it was all about, this time my father sent me to the conference. And at the end of the conference, I was invited to the organization trustee board meeting and was appointed as a junior trustee. End of quote. So this story kind of says that if you have had someone that has already been mentoring you and you actually get to recognize someone else, before you follow them, you kind of have to first go back to the previous mentor, to the previous father, to kind of send you. What would you like to tell people about that whole thing?
I think this is something that, of course, we are talking about this mostly from a church perspective, and I think this is something that is missing from our generation. Not even going to be under someone else's authority, but sometimes young people and people who are just upcoming, sometimes you get an opportunity and you forget the person in authority. You just choose to go. For example, what we are doing today, it's an initiative. Vital Readings is an idea and all that that is being implemented. But for us to do it, we had to first inform the father figure in our lives for just that blessing. Even in a family setting, you just don't go anywhere without telling your father or your mother that I'm going to this place, I'm going to the market, I'm going to play with my friends. So it's a more of a respect that, and also that blessing that of a father and the blessing of a parent that comes with it.
Yeah, I think you have explained it in such a very clear way, and I think people can find more about the concept of following in the book. Now, so we go to chapter 4, and he talks about submission. It looks like once you have followed someone, you start submitting to them. And I will read just a short quote on page 63, where he says, and I quote, "You cannot learn from someone you are not willing to obey. Many people miss a lot from their mentors because they don't pay attention on the minor instruction. Sometimes a mentor will tell you to do things that may look small in your eyes, but when you don't cooperate, you are sending a message that you are not ready for mentorship." One of the stories he shares in this book that I find very interesting about this concept of submission, that there's this time that they had gone to one of the places in Canada with Dr. Miles Monroe, and he tells him that tomorrow I will be in Boston. He doesn't add anything else. He just tells him tomorrow I will be in Boston, and the author goes back home, and that was like a 7-hour drive back home. He goes there, and the next morning, I don't know if is that we kind of have a partial commitment. We have a kind of a partial commitment that someone will not just give you such a kind of information and you act on it. But I think in the end we kind of lose. We are the one on the losing end.
It's very hard to learn from someone that you don't obey. That's why I think it's very hard even to learn from your peers. Even sometimes a peer can say something that is very strong, but because of the level of respect that you have for them, you miss it. But when someone you obey and have so much expectation for them, when they say something, then it becomes new. So even the author says it, I think in this chapter, I think it's on page 63. He says you cannot learn from someone you're not willing to obey. And he says that many people miss a lot from their mentors because they don't pay attention on their minor instructions. So it's more of how much you obey, and it applies with God. God will not tell you to do something when you didn't obey the last instruction he told you. So the more you obey God, the more you learn a lot from Him. Yeah.
Yeah. The next chapter, he called it adoption. Probably this is the recognition by on the other end of the mentee, and this is what he writes. And I quote: some of the mentees find that their life assignment is linked to their mentor's assignment and do not want to be released, but rather want to take the relationship to the next level of becoming a son. Just like in the natural, the father makes the decision first to father you before you as a son can even make any choice. It's the father's decision to adopt you as a son. You cannot become a son to someone who has not adopted you first. Sometimes a potential son will show commitment and submission that will trigger the adoption, but a son cannot auto-proclaim such. Fathers always adopt first, but the relationship is not complete until the sons respond and accept to submit to the fathers. So this is adoption. It says when it comes to adoption, when it comes to adopting a son, which is a word that he would explain much better in Romans, I think 18:15, that says Abba Father. The only word that has not been translated, he says in the book. And he says that this kind of adoption is not a mere taking someone in your house. It's not like you take a maid in your home and that's it. No, this is another level of ownership. It's like someone becomes legally your son, and will inherit everything from you. So it's like before taking on someone like that, I mean, before that kind of relationship happens, before this process, before this process can be done with, it's gonna be the father that takes the first steps and welcomes you into this kind of relationship. And I think that's what God did to us.
Yeah. And that's what makes our relationship with God very, very special. You know, because it was a choice. To me, sometimes I even think if even the biological father, if it was more of a choice, you can see that people who give birth when they have chosen to, when it's not something that has come against their will or when they are not ready, when it's time, like when a couple decides it's time to give birth, there is a special treatment that they give to their kids. So what makes adoption very special is that a father chooses you, and they choose with having all in the mind that they are going to father you, they are going to sustain you, and they are going to give you everything you need. So I think the most, what I love most about this chapter is that choice of a father making a choice, and I think it's very, very important. Yeah.
Yeah, so he goes on to talk about abandonment.
Mm.
It's like it looks like once you have been adopted, then you will have to abandon. But
Mm.
what about abandonment? This is what he says about this step, abandonment, and I quote: "Abandonment happens when an adopted son decides to totally submit and surrender his potential to the father.
Mm.
This is the ultimate level of sonship. Many people do not reach this level because they want to hold on to what they believe they have, or simply
Mm.
cannot accept the idea of surrendering themselves to someone else's vision when they have just to fulfill their own." Yeah, I
Mm.
think this is a tough one.
Mm.
Abandoning your vision, abandoning your life and all that, and just
Mm.
submit it all under someone else's vision. I think it's very tough, and I don't want to give out what I don't have, but I kind of see this in your life in some kind of way.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think it becomes abandonment when you have discovered something,
Mm-hmm.
when you have discovered your vision,
Mm-hmm.
and then, and I think with with our human nature,
Mm-hmm.
it's very hard. Uh, in the book, I'll quote what the author said.
Mm-hmm.
It says, I think it's on page 72, where it says, where did I see it?
Page 72.
It says the sincere act of abandonment is only possible after your vision has been revealed to you.
Mm-hmm.
Here you will gain a more and definite definition of the term abandonment. So you have discovered something that everyone prays for to understand and know what God has created them, and then you have to bury it, if I may say. You have it's a way of, but if you look on a positive way, it's like sowing what
Mm-hmm.
it becomes a seed,
Mm-hmm.
and then, but this is a very hard. I think it's one of the hardest in this book, something to understand, but it's the hardest step. But it's also a step that if you manage to do it, you reap even more.
So you're trying to say that it's worth it?
Yes.
You know, I've seen you. I've seen you serving almost the mission the missions
Mm.
that I know
Mm.
as of now are 3.
Mm.
Serving under 3 missions,
Mm.
and some sort of an abandonment kind of way.
Mm.
Serving these people without being paid.
Mm.
You know, and I think maybe comes easier, I would say, because of selfishness. I would say comes easier for you because you're a businessman.
Mm.
But for someone like me who receives a monthly salary, it will be much harder for me.
Mm.
Anyways, that might be just an excuse. But I'm trying to say, with what you have already been like doing, investing all that much time and energy and money and all that,
Mm.
would you really look into the eyes of the people that are viewing this conversation and say that it's worth it? It's worth it to abandon some of these things and, you know, completely submit yourself under someone, sort of ignoring sometimes your own path of life.
Yeah, because this is there's nothing new that any of us is going to bring. So whatever you're going to do, there's someone who has done it before. So sowing your life, in a way, I don't want to say that this should be the attitude that you take when you are going to submit under someone's authority, but because when you start from where they have stopped. So you gain 40 or 80 years or 100 years, depending on who you are serving, of experience than you would get if you just walked alone. But it's also a very dangerous thing to do if you haven't been recognized. It's very hard to it's very dangerous, and it's very hard to submit and abandon your vision to someone who has not yet recognized you. So I'll be against that in a way.
Okay. So part of what he says is the next step, just like you were saying, is when you have been given access. It's the next step. And one of the stories he gives in this chapter. So you have already touched the next chapter, which is called Covering, in which he explains the fact that with access you would definitely have to be exposed to your father's weakness. It's the responsibility of the son to cover his father figure's weakness, but not just to cover them, but also to find a solution. One of the examples he gives is how when Dr. Miles Monroe was talking about how he wanted to reach millions of people in a very short time, and he couldn't. It's when the author, Mr. Hubert, thought of starting to live stream his messages, and it did not just help him to help his master or his father, but also helped him to start his first business. Thinking about this, I remembered. I don't remember exactly what it was, but there was this time. I don't remember if it was some of the other group of young men that we meet, where it was actually at church. I think it was at church. There's some people that were leaving the church, and it's you that for the first time I heard mentioning about going out there to expose. I mean, leaving whichever group you belong to, and you start exposing your father's weakness. And you mentioned of how it's very dangerous, not to your fathers, but to yourself. So at that time, because I had not read the book yet, I was wondering, where does this guy? I mean, where do you get those kind of things? And I remember the example you gave of this what was his name, Noah, and his sons, and how the son exposes just one weakness, but the legacy of what happens to his descendants is even worse than what happened to Noah himself.
I think I got the principle from the book, but there's also one of the interviews of the author and his father, Dr. Miles Monroe. I think it's the only video I've seen them together on a panel, and he was asking it. To me, it looked like a tricky question, and then he answered that it's a responsibility of a son to cover the weakness of a father, and I think.
What was the question? They asked him.
They were asking him about. I don't remember the exact question that they asked him, but what I remember the answer because it's what got me. He said it's a responsibility of a son to cover the father. So that was very intriguing to me. Yeah. And I think that's something that the sons have failed to do. To cover the weaknesses of our father, instead we choose to expose them. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I know that is commonly practiced in Rwanda is when a child makes comments about his or her parents in a negative way, you lose respect of the people that you are talking to.
Yes.
They'll start looking at you as if you have a serious problem. They will be like, one of these will be like, "Hey man, whatever your dad does, you don't say such things about your parent." Yeah. Yet in many other cultures, looks like it's okay. A lot of people that I'm not going to talk about will be on camera. They will be like, my mother used to do the ABCDs and my father used to do ABCDs. And I think it's a big mistake. I think it's a huge mistake. A lot of Rwandan is the worst, not the worst, probably let me use the word, the best they will do is they will say, I'm saying this because I asked the permission to share it, and I'm sharing it for the sake of edifying those that I'm talking to. Yeah, so I think it's a very interesting concept, just like you were saying. it's a responsibility of a son to cover his father's weaknesses.
And I think it's the importance of whatever we're talking about sonship, because let's take a normal example. If a father is not good at technology, so it's a responsibility of a son to set whatever you have to set for the father to be able to produce whatever they need to produce. So it's not more of a weakness, but even things that a father cannot do physically, it's a responsibility of a son to take care of that. Yeah.
So chapter 9 talks about value, and he says, I quote, "When you cover your father's weaknesses or respond to his needs, you become valuable to him. He can trust you with more. God blesses sons through their father's words. This must come from a merry heart, though. It is when you quench a father's thirst that his heart can bless you." End of quote. What do you think?
I think I believe it, and I think I believe there's something that God has put in the words of men. There's a power on the tongue, and when it comes to father figures, it's something that we can't even be able to explain with words. But I think a happy father is a it's a good place to be. It's a good place to be in the presence of a happy father. Even God Himself, His blessing is, He blesses us when we obey Him. He blesses us when we do what He likes. So I think it's a responsibility of a son to put a smile on the father's face.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm not going to expand on, but which is mentioned, is how you deal with a bad father and actually make him bless you, even though he was a bad father figure. And he gives examples of David, how King Saul blessed him twice, even though he was a very bad father figure, but the son got him to bless him. So that approach of how you get even a bad father figure to bless you is explained in the book, and I think as people get to read the book, they will find much more in the book. So the last chapter, chapter 10, it's about legacy. And I love the two quotes of Dr. Miles Monroe that the author quotes here. The first one saying that success without a successor is a failure. And he also says that success is not what happens when you are alive. It's what happens when you are gone. So this is for our audience. I would like to ask you a little bit of a tough question. Whose legacy are you carrying on, and how do you intend to leave your legacy?
At the moment, I wouldn't say something that is not yet clear, but I'll twist your I'll twist your question.
To me though.
I think I'll twist it to Rwandans as we are in the election. This is something that has been going on. When we look at what is happening in our nation at the moment with our loved president, and everyone says what will happen if this man is no longer. And my prayer is that he will definitely find a successor, but it also goes as a challenge to the youth and to young people. It will be worthless if we had fathers who are doing big things, incredible things, and we fail to be eligible for that succession. So I think it's more of a son's responsibility than it is for a father to carry on the legacy. I was reading Ephesians chapter 5 last night, and verse 1, it says we should aim to be the beloved sons. So the beloved sons are the ones that carry on the legacy. So I encourage the young people and the sons to take on the legacy.
The legacy. when I look at the context of Rwandan politics and all that, I actually think there are very many successors of President Kagame. It's just that he still is too big. He still is too big and has achieved so much that you don't want to trust whoever looks like he would take over from him. I mean, you cannot easily trust someone that you haven't tested, because whoever is there, we haven't seen what they do. But President Kagame has been with Rwanda since 1994, and he's gone through so much that you can easily trust him to keep doing that. Recently, I was talking to a friend of mine. They had gone to the election campaign, and he comes back and he's related to one of very respected generals here. And we were talking about if President Kagame was not the president, this general would do it way much the same like him. Because, by the way, I don't know if this man would write a book about sonship. If he was write a book about sonship, I think he would have so much to share. Actually, I'm not gonna keep him secret. When you look at General James Kabarebe, and even with this book that we were just reading through, the time that he started working with President Kagame, that was way far before the Rwandan struggle. They started working together in Uganda, and he was with him through so much during the 4-year war in Rwanda of liberation, and even after the liberation. And today, 30 years after the genocide was stopped, he still serves. And I think if we are talking about the beloved son, he still remains a beloved son. But of course, we always want to look at this from a generational standpoint, and that's why we usually say the generation of President Kagame and General James and others are almost, kind of continuing to slowly give way to young people to take over. And I don't think that we are disappointed. So far, the young people, what they are doing, those who are in uniform, those who are serving in the hospitals, they are really doing a great job. And I never get worried about what's going to happen when our fathers are no longer in the positions, when they are no longer serving. But just like you were saying, I think it's a challenge to us to commit ourselves to doing great, doing better, to making sure that the legacy of Rwanda continues. But we kind of went so much into our Rwandan context, and we forget to explain the principle to the leaders that might have come here to sort of have a taste of the book. So what's the principle to someone who is not a Rwandan, but who is reading who wants to test the book? What's the legacy thing? What is it about it?
I think this is more of a chapter that is because when I was reading the book, I reached to this topic, to this chapter, and I felt it was far ahead of me. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a chapter that fathers need to read, and because he quoted, there is no success without a successor. Mm-hmm. So who are you investing in as a father? And so it's more of a father to recognize who they will leave their legacy to. So my challenge also goes to, I know you can't challenge a father figure, but my challenge goes to...
You're not challenging your father, you're challenging father figures.
It goes to the father figures. Who are you leaving your legacy with?
One of the amazing things that I think we should conclude with, I want to read a portion in the book, and I'll let you comment about it. It's something that amazed me so much. And he says, God said in Malachi, the last verse of the Old Testament, that he will have to bring back fathers to the sons and sons to the fathers, or he have no choice but to destroy the land. And he says that when this relationship of the father and sons is not there, the land will be destroyed. I think it kind of comes to what we are talking about, and as we conclude, what makes this book exceptional, and what makes it and I quote, God said in Malachi, the last verse of the Old Testament, that He will have to bring back father to the sons and sons to the fathers, or you have no choice but to destroy the land. And it was amazing to me because looks like the life of a nation, the life of a family, the life of a business hangs on a relationship between fathers and sons. So as we conclude, I wanted to hear your views about this, and then come the end of our conversation about this book. It has been an amazing book.
I'll try to relate it with the Bible, and this one of the last verses that we see in the Old Testament, and one of the things that Jesus came to do was to reconcile us with the Father. So I think there is no success if this relationship is not there. Even in the Christianity, if you are not related to the Father, if you don't have a healthy relationship with the Father, then your spiritual life is dead. So I think it's a good place to be. And as we said, we will not tell you everything about the book. This chapter has a lot of things regarding legacy, and as the author likes to say, that it can be a book in itself. Each of these chapters can be a book in itself. So I encourage everyone to find this book and read it, and you will not be disappointed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for choosing to join us. This book is one of the greatest reads that I have had. It's one of the best books you read for sure, and I encourage you to go and read it. I also encourage you to go find more of his content on his YouTube channel. It's called Hubert SUGIRA HATEGEKIMANA. He has a lot of contents there that you would some of which relate to this book. But of course, the book is a whole different thing. So I encourage you to go read the book, and I hope, I can't promise you, but I hope that we'll have an interview with him on this book, and we'll get to know much more about what's in this book. Thank you.